I happen to be an African, so you have to work with me. We are a culture that nods and goes, and when you talk to us, okay? So, I expect that this afternoon. First of all, I apologize for being late. We had quite a spirited conversation in our class today, and it kind of stretched a little bit. And then I had to go pick up my wife because she wanted to be present today. So in the last 10 minutes, I drove to Mays Business School, brought her back here, and wanted her to be here today. The topic that we're talking about today is leadership and relationship building. And I put the word relationship in terms of the title. And somebody one of the organizers sent me an email to say, is that a typo? I said, no, it's not. It's actually what I was trying to get at, is how to be real. Thank you. Thank you, ma'am. How to be real. There's a wonderful piece that it's called The Paradigm of Our Time in History that kind of contrasts what has happened to us as a people. And for me, as a foreign national who immigrated to the United States 18 years ago, I'm a very, 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 very intense critic of what happens in the United States. And I'll tell you why. I am a very firm critic of it because I believe in the idea of this country. And if a country such as this one could raise somebody who came here 18 years ago to position them to be in a place where they're in a picture like you see up here with the former president of the United States, you live in a great country. And so because of that, it brings me to a place of intense criticism. And I actually take it a step further. I tell my undergrad students that they're so pathetic that they don't know what they have. One of my favorite lectures is called Moving from Patheticness to Propheticness. And I say you are so pathetic because you don't even recognize that which you have. In fact, when I teach ethics, I'd like to tell people that, ethics for me to an American is not recognizing the privilege and the advantages that you have, being unethical. It is unethical that you don't see that which you have. Anyway, so today, a nice quote from Mr. Gandhi: the purpose of life is to know oneself. We cannot do this unless we learn to identify with all that lives. Unless we learn to identify with all that lives. I want you all to practice with me. Let's say this together. Umweo. Umweo. Y'all, come on, don't make it sound Texan. Umweo. Y'all like umweo? Umweo. Wamuntu. Wava. Mukutui. Umweo. Wamuntu. Wava. Mukutui. Your life is in your ear. I love it. Last week I was in the same place, and it's an honor to speak here before very esteemed folks. I was in this place and I got to listen to Ambassador Crocker, and he said something that really, really made me appreciate his leadership. He brought up humility. Those of you that were there last week, do you remember that? He brought up humility. And I was so excited. I thought, this looks like a big missing piece in Western dialogue. My father went to Harvard, sponsored by USAID, and then he was in America for about 3 months. He said to me, Henry, America is the only place you could go to where somebody tells you what they earn, where they live, in about 5 minutes of meeting them. He said they really like to put themselves out there. He said, I appreciate it and I also don't appreciate it. Paradigms. Paradigms. Hold that in mind as I speak to you today. Paradigms. Paradigms. Leadership is the art of influencing people, organizations, and institutions to accomplish missions that serve the public interest. By virtue of the fact that for the students that you're sitting in here, you are a leader whether you like it or whether you like it or come on, folks, don't leave me hanging. I know it's lunchtime. Whether you like it or not, you're a leader. But here's the catch. Leadership, I love it. We call it an art, okay? An art, okay? Are we together? Y'all with me? Please don't check out. We're going somewhere. We call it an art. My daughter, hey, my daughter, hey, my daughter, my daughter, my daughter, hey. Was that beautiful to you? My daughter, hey. That's actually African soukous. In the Congo, that's a party that is just jumping. And to you, you're like. So if we're calling leadership an art, what are the ramifications of how you and I negotiate this enterprise called leadership? How do we develop contextual intelligence that allows for us to be efficient and to be appropriate, responsive to the very needs that we serve in the moment? This morning in the class that I just finished, we had Ambassador Charles Stilth, who was the ambassador to Tanzania under the Clinton administration. He spoke to my class via telephone from Boston University. He is running a center at Boston University called the African Presidential and Archive Research Center. I got to visit that center a couple years ago. One of the things I loved that he said this morning was, I was faithful in the moment. I was faithful in the moment. How do you know? I think it's the same themes, Ambassador, you raised last week. I was faithful in the moment. Y'all got to work with me. My goodness. We're talking about diversity. You're like about the whitest people I've ever met. By that, I mean it very respectfully, by the way. Did y'all notice that my title said potent chaos at the beginning? Did y'all notice? Anybody pick that up? Did you see the PC in there? It stands for political correctness. Y'all notice that? I am not politically correct. But I'm sensitive. So in my preparation for today, I wanted to describe leadership to you. Notice how politically incorrect I am. I still have a guy with a cigarette in my slides. This idea called global leadership, I think this is what we try to do here at the Bush School. And that's why y'all are sitting here on a Monday afternoon having a brown bag lunch, talking about diversity. What does global leadership look like? First of all, ladies and gentlemen, all of us in here have to be photographers. And like we've said in our definition, it's an art. We are taking wonderful pictures. I love photos. You look at a photo, it's almost like you could be in the moment. You know what I'm saying? Or if you look at a photo of a friend that has just passed away, you could just pick up that photo and just feel like you're standing next to them and remember. So we have to be like photographers, and that takes a great skill. So number one, creativity. First, sorry about the verbiage, but I couldn't help it. First, like world-class photography, learning global leadership and management requires a high degree of creativity. Creativity in this sense involves looking at the wicked challenges and the dynamic challenges that have become ordinary in today's global context and seeing the prospects and solutions for an extraordinary future that significantly improves the human and ecological condition. We have to be creative. A couple of years ago, I took students to Ghana, and we were in Accra. And there was a lady, carrying a huge load of stuff on her head. And she was running between the lanes in traffic in mid-morning, 8 o'clock traffic in Accra. And my students, they're all Aggies, they're like, oh my goodness, poor lady. And I said, you missed out on seeing the entrepreneur. Your Western eyes do not offer you enough creativity in order for you to identify that woman as an entrepreneur. Your model is based on pity, not partnership. Because when you pity me, all you see is my deficit. Sitting over lunch with a former president of my country in 2012, he introduced me to something. He said, Henry, Africa has always been infanticized, it's treated like an infant. When Bono speaks for us, the world listens, but when we speak for ourselves, nobody even listens. So it takes a creativity, and that's why I love what Ambassador Crocker said. Humility, the word for humility in my language is ukuichefia, is to make yourself small, as I'm doing right now. I'm so small that I could listen to all of you in this room if you spoke. Not I'm so grand and so big because I went to the Bush School and I got a master's in public service, and therefore I know what you need because I studied your country. As they say in Houston, we have a. So creativity. Number 2, mind and soul. Second, like world-class photography, learning global leadership and management involves both a keen mind for mastering a new craft and an engaged heart filled with a passion for public service and global improvement. Global leadership and management necessitates the integration of persons and communities, an individual collective perspective. An individual what? Collective perspective. Say with me, Ubuntu. 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 I love it. Ambassador Crocker is getting the whole thing going, you know. Ubuntu. It's a Zulu word that means I am because you are, and you are because I am. That's deeply African. We were the first diplomats. If you want to learn diplomacy, watch Africans. When I come before Ambassador Crocker, if this was in my country, guess how I'd greet him? Not like this. No. He's a former ambassador. Guess how I come before him? Like this. Not because I'm subjugated to him, but because I honor his place. You can't have authority if you've not authored anything. Look at the word authority. The root in there is author. He's authored things that I'm yet to author. Therefore, I place respect on him. But I think these days in our social contract, it's kind of like, why do I have to do that? I'm human just like he is. He puts on his pants just like I do. Don't we say that kind of stuff? Sitting at a hotel lobby in Tunisia, I took A&M students. That's before Ben Ali left when he was president. And I was in Tunisia, in Tunis, in a hotel lobby. And an Arab man came and sat next to me. And I'll never forget his words. He said, son, he just randomly started talking to me when he heard I was from the US. He said, son, the day that teachers start to fear students, welcome tyranny. The day that teachers start to fear students, welcome tyranny. That is the story of America, he said. There's depth in what he said to me, because I speak in high schools and I meet a lot of intimidated teachers. In fact, I'm on my way today after this, in the afternoon, I'm going to be speaking to about 15 high schools this week, recruiting for A&M. And I see that a lot. So when we talk about this diversity, I'm not talking, some of us, especially now, we hate the word diversity because we feel like it's going to be about what? Let's just be, somebody say, it's going to be about what? Race. Oh, here we go again, another black guy to tell us how we did his people. I just tell it like it is, I'm sorry. I have the privilege of not being from here. So we have to have mind and soul, show up with a heart. Is it possible that too many of us have head knowledge, but a heart hasn't showed up? This is the stuff of emotional intelligence, right? If you're studying that in psychology. How does your heart show up? How does your heart show up? Folks, how does your heart show up? Remember when you met that girl that my wife's sitting right there, by the way. Yo, let's acknowledge my wife. She's sitting right there. When I saw her, right, I had every excuse to be in her area. Hey, where you going? She's an architect. I studied agriculture. I started liking architecture. Because guess what? I needed my heart to show up. I couldn't win this woman's heart over just with my head knowledge. That takes a level of creativity. I think we forget that. Human relationships are so dynamic that which applies in dyadic relationships one-on-one is the same thing that applies organizationally too. Again, Houston, we have training our technique. Finally, like world-class photography, learning global leadership and management requires that we train our technique. As individuals, as team members, as organizations, collaborators, and as global citizens. This training of our technique includes selecting an appropriate global lens. Y'all see that? mental perspective. My students that couldn't see the entrepreneur, all they saw was a struggling woman. But this woman is probably paying for her kids to go to college, selling that produce every day from sunrise to sunset. Is that entrepreneurship, folks? Learning the public leadership and management craft, including concepts and tools, and putting ourselves in the right place with the combination of what? Self-awareness and contextual what? Intelligence. So, in a couple of weeks, I'm taking 15 students to Africa. Actually, in a couple of months. We're going to be there when the chief of my tribe is installed. The chief of my tribe happens to be somebody who's in my line of background. My grandmother was royalty. Had she been male, I would have been possibly royalty, but we lost it because my grandmother was female. But in a couple of weeks, they're going to install the new chief of my tribe. His name is Chitimukulu, which means the big tree. And we're so privileged. This year, the man that's going to be the chief of my tribe, the paramount chief, is actually a very well-learned man. He writes papers. I like to read what he writes. And he happens to be a friend of my father's. And so I asked my dad and said, can I take my Aggie students to the coronation of this chief? And we're going to do it, August 8th. But what excites me is this. My students are going to have what they call cognitive dissonance. And sorry, no, not cognitive dissonance. There's a word that I was thinking about, where what they're experiencing does not line up with what they know. Is it cognitive dissonance? Yes, cognitive dissonance, thank you. Cognitive dissonance. And you know what's going to happen that day? The president of my country is going to be at this event, and he's going to be watching a local chief of a tribe being installed as head of the group. The president of the whole country is going to be on his knees to greet the chief of the tribe. And my students are going to say, I thought the president was higher than the chief, because they will lack what? Contextual intelligence. They won't recognize that in African society, you're first tribal, then you're second. You hear what I'm saying? Literally, when you come before a chief in my tribe, you go crawling on the ground, and you don't come empty-handed. My father's already given me ideas of the gifts to bring. Again, I wanted to tell him, because I'm so American, I was like, Dad, we don't have to bring gifts. We're showing up. We're the gift. Ambassador Crocker, thank you for emphasizing humility. Oh, we need it so bad. We did. I was teaching a class and I was talking about HIV statistics in my homeland. And I've lost a lot of family members from HIV. And one undergrad student stood up and said, Dr. Musoma, I did research in high school on HIV. I don't think what you're saying is true. And I thought, man, I've lost so many people from this disease. I've seen it firsthand. And you're going to tell me off of a high school project that you know what's going on in my homeland. Diversity. In case you're wondering where we're going with this, diversity is what we're talking about. I'm going to patch it all together, but please stay with me. So we have an issue of culture. And culture is defined as the learned beliefs, values, rules, norms, and symbols, and traditions that are common to a group of people. It is our culture that we make, and it's through our culture that we make and add meaning. For those of you that love to read, please read Peter Senge's work on the ladder of inference. And he talks about how we make our decisions. You know, we see something real quickly, and then we add meaning. I'll tell you a quick story. When I first moved to College Station, my wife and I had a nice house in College Station on Nueces Street, right next to A&M Consolidated High School. And I was watering my yard. A police car pulled up. Then a few moments, a second police car pulled up. Then they asked me to prove that I lived in that house. And I made an executive decision. I chose to be better, not bitter. I ran in the house. I got the lease agreement, showed it to police officers, and then they left. A few moments later, an older white gentleman walks up and he says, "Howdy." I said, "Howdy." He says, "There's a lot of your kind moving in the neighborhood." I was the one that sent the police, was just making sure. That was 2005. The man felt like he knew me before he even met me. But again, I don't fault him. He's a product of his Culture. And we all are products of our culture. Please don't be self-righteous in here, because we make that mistake, all of us. And I'll tell you how I made the same mistake. So that's the first story, right? The second story is I moved to another neighborhood. And this time, Dr. Sarami, I'm like in a place where I'm making good money so I could have somebody do my landscaping. You know, that's a rival in America right there. When somebody else is cutting your grass, you've arrived. And you've got your BMW in the garage. You know what BMW stands for, right? Black man working. Please laugh at that joke. It's a joke. Moved to this place. I asked this man to cut my grass. He says, no, he can't cut my grass. He says, I've already got 3 yards. This is too much for me. I can't add on a next yard. So I said, okay, fine. The next week, I see him cutting another yard, making how many? 4. I did this. I don't recommend that you do this, but I'm kind of a positive deviant. I walked up to the man and I said, sir, did you refuse to cut my grass because I'm black? He happened to be Caucasian. And guess what? I'm connecting this with Peter Sange's work on the ladder of inference. I was starting to make meaning of something that had no connection. Because of the way I was treated by the police officers and the older gentlemen, I started to look now at everybody that I was encountering as being of the same mindset. And then this man just went pale, y'all. He just paled out. He looked at me and he said, what do you mean? I said, well, last week I counted you had 3 yards. This week you have 4. Then he said, oh, you mean that house right there? I said, yeah. He said, yeah, the lady in there is ill. She asked me for a favor. Isn't that humbling? And how many times do you and I do that, whether it's on organizational level, familial level, or institutional, however you will. So folks, our culture does not do us a favor. So the other thing that happens when we have this issue of culture, we all are kind of prejudiced. And guess, I'll define prejudice for you. It's a largely fixed attitude, belief, or emotion held by an individual about another individual or group that is based on faulty or unsubstantiated data. Faulty or unsubstantiated data. Can we be real in here? By the way, that's why I put the title real. Y'all notice that right now? You're picking that up. Can we be real? How many of you, when you meet somebody who doesn't speak English as well as you do, think they're not as smart as you think they were? Please be honest. If you've ever thought that in your mind, raise your hand. But Ambassador, you don't have to do that, sir. Thank you. Isn't that interesting? You could be talking to somebody who has more credentials and more recognition than you do, and just because they can't speak your language, you think they're not smart. So prejudice. I have a video to show you on this, but I think because of time I won't. It's from the movie Crash. Do it. Sorry about that. Is that lights? Oh, it's clear.
But you don't think reporters listen to police calls?
I need to talk to you for a second.
Just give me the drive. Fine, plan it, will you? Now. Yes. Yes, fine.
I want the locks changed again in the morning.
You want? Look, why don't you just go lie down, huh? Have you checked on James?
Well, of course I've checked on James. I've checked on him every 5 minutes since we've been home. Do not patronize me. I want the locks changed again in the morning.
Hey, just go to bed.
You know what? Didn't I just ask you not to treat me like a child? It's okay, I go home now.
It's fine. Thank you very much for staying with me.
You're welcome, no problem. Good night, Miss Joy.
We'll see you tomorrow.
I would like the locks changed again in the morning. And you know what? You might mention that we'd appreciate it if next time they didn't send a gang member.
gang member?
Yes, yes.
Well, you mean that kid in there?
Yes, the guy in there with the shaved head, the pants around his ass, the prison tattoo.
Those are not prison tattoos.
Oh, really? And he's not going to go sell our key to one of his gangbanger friends the moment he is out our
We've had a
door.
really tough night. I think it'd be best if you just went upstairs right
And
now.
what, wait for them to break in? I just had a gun pointed in my face.
You lowered your voice.
And it was my fault because I knew it was going to happen. But if a white person sees two black men walking towards her and she turns and walks in the other direction, she's a racist, right? Well, I got scared and I didn't say anything, and 10 seconds later, I had a gun in my face. Now, I am telling you, your amigo in there is going to sell our key to one of his homies, and this time it'd be really great if you acted like you actually gave a
So Prejudice. Has everybody seen that movie? I apologize for the language, but it does. I can't take away from it. It speaks to a lot. Prejudice. And then ethnocentrism. You know what the frog is saying? Wow, that's one big ugly frog. And the cow is saying, yikes, what a teeny weeny cow. When you and I are ethnocentric, all we see is ourselves. Let me give you the definition of ethnocentrism. Ethnocentrism is the view of things in which one's own group is the center of everything, and all others are scaled and rated within reference to it. Each group nourishes its own pride and vanity, boasts itself superior, exalts its own divinities, and looks with contempt on outsiders. That's ethnocentrism. I love it when I speak to high school students and I say, what is the greatest country in the world? And they say America, then I say Zambia. And we have this thing going. I said, well, you know what? We don't have policemen in our schools. They're like, I said, you know, we're kind of safe. You know, y'all kill each other in your schools. We don't. Maybe we're better. But do we have to be better than you? No. It's a lesson I try to teach them. Because we all have different things that we're good at and all that. I think diversity and respect and the adherence to it allows for you and I to resign the need to be the best. It affords an opportunity for partnership rather than pity. And Africans will tell you, I'm African, we're tired of pity. One of my friend's sisters wrote a book that some of you have read. It's called Dead Aid. Dambisa Moyo. And she told Mr. Gates, frankly speaking, we're tired of your aid. Come and build a Microsoft plant. And he didn't like that. He called her book evil. But that's what I love about America. A young lady would come who grew up in a little country called Zambia, come to America, get an education, and say something that rattles a billionaire. Isn't that awesome? With her pen. So here we go, folks. I've said some hard stuff today. We need strong ears to hear ourselves judged frankly. And because there are few who can endure frank criticism without being stung by it, those who venture to criticize us perform a remarkable act of friendship. For to undertake to wound or offend a man or a woman for his or her own good is to have a healthy love for him or her. So each time I criticize, I am saying to you, give it to me, please. I love you. Can somebody read these words out real loud? Please. Sean, please.
He said, the British rulers take us to be lowly and ignorant, that they assume that, like the Kafirs, who can be pleased with toys and pins, we can also be fobbed off with trinkets. Ours is one continual struggle against the degradation sought to be inflicted upon us by the Europeans, who desire to degrade us to the level of the rock Kafir, whose occupation is hunting, and whose sole ambition is to collect a certain number of cattle to buy a wife with, and then pass his life in indolence and nakedness. Kafirs are, as a rule, uncivilized. The convicts even more so. They are troublesome, very dirty, and live almost like animals.
Guess who those words are from? Somebody take a guess. Please, anybody? By the way, the word kafir is the same as the N-word in the United States and South Africa. Whose words are those? Those are Gandhi's words. Shocked, anybody? Why are we shocked? Why? Yes, sir.
Because Gandhi is associated with peace and forgiveness. It seems odd that he would say something so angry.
Because he's associated with peace and forgiveness, it seems odd that he say something so angry. Do y'all believe he said those words? Yes, no? Do you not want to believe that he said those words? Probably yes, right? Did you notice I quoted him on the first slide? And then now I have this other slide of him. The paradigms! The paradigms. I love the shirt that you said we used to be schizophrenic, but now we're all okay. The paradigms of humanity. There's an article that I would love to send out, if it's possible to send it out to the grad students. It was out of the Star Telegram in Fort Worth. It talks about why we hate Bernie Madoff. And then the conclusion from this author is that he reminds us of us and our capacity for injustice. So Mr. Gandhi said those words, ladies and gentlemen. Let me give you another example of how Africa was perceived. I'm speaking from the point of view of Africa because that's what I really, really know. Sir, how big do you think Africa is? Thanks for being my Gold Star student today.
How big?
Yes, sir. What do you think we could fit in Africa continent-wise? Just kind of just play with it.
Like North and South America.
North and South America in Africa?
Yeah, why not? And Europe.
And Europe? That's enough? That's all?
Maybe.
And China, maybe? Sir, this is how big Africa is. Y'all see that? It's huge. Why is it viewed as small? It's a question. Why? Yes, sir. Vincent.
Because maps are made by others in the United States rather than Africa.
Yes, sir. One.
Because there is not a great power within Africa as of now.
Yes, sir.
I agree with what Juan says. There is no great power. There is low impact on international affairs and economy and social and cultural life to some extent as well. But also, speaking about the maps, right, the map, and that, sorry, I forgot the name, but that was, the projection from a globe to a 2D map, yes. It is made that way that the areas near the North and South Pole, they look bigger, and the areas closer to the equator, they look smaller. If you can see, like, Greenland looks much bigger than Australia. So that is why, and one of the reasons why northern countries look bigger than the southern.
So maybe it's just a drawing situation. But this is just things to, it's things to ask ourselves questions about, right? We all are students, right? I was surprised when I saw how big it was. I thought maybe it's because this is how people want to see it. I don't know. Who's this gentleman here? Anybody know him? Anybody? His name is Congressman Howard L. Berman from California. He was instrumental in removing the law that actually labeled Nelson Mandela as a terrorist up until July 1st of 2008. Up until when? July. I'll give you the exact bill, by the way, in case you want to go look it up. It's called the HR 5690. It became law in 2008. So up until 2008, one of the world's greatest statesmen was a terrorist. If you think he was a great statesman, I don't know how you feel. That picture is a picture of me shaking hands with the first president of my country. His name is Kenneth Kaunda. He ruled my country for 27 years. Talk about power. Oh my goodness. This man had power, y'all. It's crazy. People say the American president is the most powerful man on the planet. No. Kaunda was powerful. He was powerful. When he came to town, we lined up in the streets with little flags like this. And he said, "Sokone, sokone, 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 sokone. Wish I would have won on this. Wave, wave, wave. He who doesn't wave is a son of a witch." That's what he used to say. And we'd wave. Cast, spellbound. I used to cry when he told me he was dying. Because we thought we had no other way to be led but by him. I still remember his Rolls Royce that was a gift from the Queen when he drove through town was black. And I remember as a kid standing like this, big shorts, ashy knees. Kaunda pesondele sakumulu, Kaunda on earth, God in heaven, he used to say. And he ruled us for how many years? 27 years. He's still alive, by the way. He's the same age as President Bush. He's 90. But he too was in the liberation struggle for his people. 109, that number shouldn't mean anything to you, and I'll tell you what it means. 109 is the number of college-educated people we had in my country in 1964, 50 years ago, with compliments of the British. So 50 years later, when you say we are underdeveloped and we have issues, is that fair? Is it? More money was spent on one European child than was spent on all African kids sometimes in some parts of Africa where the British ruled. Diversity, to me, allows for there to be multiple stories in the place of learning. Because there's a danger in telling a single story. You've heard Chimamanda Adichie, those of you. Chimamanda Adichie, she's got a TED Talk. Please watch it. Chimamanda Adichie, she's from Nigeria. She talks about the dangers of a single story. If I keep a single story of Americans, especially Texans, I'd feel like you're like a lot of people that waste gas driving big trucks, delivering no cargo. Who gather around a football stadium to watch overfed fat men throw a little ball and don't sit. But I don't. Can you imagine? Sean, come up here real quickly. Hurry, Sean. Sean was in my class, so he and I could work together, Ambassador. And I'm going to conclude. I think I'm out of time. Hurry, Sean, run. Let's go. Savarsti's horns off, Savarsti's horns off. There's a tribe in a small town called College Station. They gather around the stadium every summer. And this tribe does some primitive acts. But guess what? We don't call it primitive because it's happening here. We call it sport. But if you found an African tribe, somebody would be like, and they gather around every week. Reporting from the Amazon jungle. The Amazon is not even in Africa. You just want to make it a jungle. Veritas, truth, Harvard says, right? 109, folks. Think about that. Can you imagine trying to build a country with 109 college-educated people? The first cabinet in my country had an average age of about 34, 35 years old. And most of them didn't even have a high school degree. And they tried to build a nation that was grossly undereducated, underfunded at all levels. There was no infrastructure. Up until about 15 years ago, my country only had one university. 15, 20 years, one major university. So, I want to challenge us all in here I won't even show you this map, it's heartbreaking, the way they portioned out the land in the country. I'm going to push the envelope a little bit further. I'm going to ask you all to write down this agreement, the Lancaster Agreement. It was signed in London across from 10 Downing Street. It was between President Robert Mugabe and a couple of European folks. And then America got involved because America said that they would help out in forms of the resettlement for the land in Zimbabwe. If you live in a country where 80% of the land was owned by people that came in from elsewhere, and your people were marginalized to 5% of the land, what would you do about it? I've lived in Zimbabwe. I went to high school there. By the way, these lands are tobacco farms. Paradigms. I don't know whether to think Mugabe is a villain. Do I agree with his methods? No. But there's an issue there. Read the Lancaster Agreement and see what was promised. I have found that the greatest help in meeting any problem with decency and self-respect and whatever courage is demanded is to know where you yourself stand. That is, to have in words what you believe and are acting from. The ambassador told us this last week. What are we acting from? Have we dealt with ourselves, the good, the bad, and the ugly? I don't stand here in front of you as somebody who's conquered everything I've spoken to you about. I don't stand here in front of you as somebody who's always humble. My wife will tell you. I don't stand here as somebody who's mastered how to negotiate all my enterprises. But I stand with you as somebody who is open and vulnerable to hear and to learn. I've understood now in my own word that I've come up with to define learning, actually a phrase I came up with, is true learning is freedom from perfection. True learning is freedom from perfection. I understand that there's no perfect men. Mahatma Gandhi, same thing. You hear what I'm saying? So I didn't stand here judging or pointing fingers. I still honor the work of Mr. Gandhi. He had his place in history. To some, when you look at President Bush 43, to some people would say, oh, he started a war that was pointless. But to us in my country, he's a man that has changed the health sector and all kinds of things. We love 43. The women even go dancing when he comes on the streets. I'm serious. Look it up online. It's kind of funny to watch President Bush trying to dance, by the way. Folks, I've had the privilege of being in this college the last 2 years, and I'm just really, really privileged. It's not a light place. When I met President Bush 41 and Mrs. Bush, she taught me, I think, the lesson from which I even speak today. Not that she taught me that lesson alone, but she affirmed what I speak of today. When I met her, I was courageous enough to ask her a hard question. I looked at her and said, Mrs. Bush, I heard that you love Bill Clinton. She goes, yeah, baby. And I said, Mrs. Bush, I know your party alliance. What's up with that? She goes, son, ever since we left the White House, Mr. Clinton has spent a significant portion of time with President Bush 41. And for the love and respect that he has for my husband, I love him. Isn't that deep? I walked away saying, man, I like you, Barb. You know how you meet somebody who's so powerful and yet so disarming? That's Mrs. Bush. That's what she did for me that day. I had a healthy respect for them. They have Ubuntu, the African word for I am because you are. And then let me wrap it up so I could have questions real quickly. Sorry. gone too far. So here's what we a call if you really want to master this thing, or not even master, because none of us will. If you really want to develop your sense of diversity and appreciating different viewpoints, you have to engage in what some people call critical pedagogy. It's habits of thought, reading, writing, speaking, which go beneath what? Surface meaning, first impressions, dominant myths, official pronouncements, traditional cliches, received wisdom, mere opinions, to understand the deep meaning, root causes, social context, ideology, and personal consequences of any action, event, object, process, organization, experience, text, subject matter, policy, mass media, or discourse. Go beneath what? Surface meaning. I love it that the Bush School affords all of us an opportunity to meet world leaders. And oh my goodness, it's disappointing when we have speakers and it's not full. I'm like, that's kind of pathetic, right? He's like, man, that's a former ambassador to look at his credentials. Ask questions. The Musoma definition of leadership is the capacity to ask potent questions. Leadership is having the capacity to ask potent questions. I have a 6-minute video. I'll just send it out. It's by Intel. It's about how you see your world, because we're out of time. And then I have a quote to give you about the lion. It's an African quote. And it says this: until the lion tells his side of the story, the tale of the hunt will always glorify the hunter. Until the lion tells his side of the story, the tale of the hunt will always glorify the hunter. Ladies and gentlemen, diversity. Thanks, Gigam. Is it questions? Or is it too late?
You've got 2 more minutes. 5 more minutes.
Thank you, sir. Any questions? Yes, sir.
So the number was 109 at the time of independence.
Yes, sir.
What's university educated? What is it now?
Oh, now we are pretty well educated. The only thing that is difficult about our education system, it was developed under a World Bank system called manpower forecasting, which specifically dealt with mining. So we produced a lot of mining engineers, geologists, and we didn't have a balanced mix of everything. So the whole economy of my country at one point was 94% was coming from copper sales. Can you imagine? And so now, with the economies of the world as they stand, if all you have is mining engineers and technically minded people, it's tricky. But we're well educated. I don't have numbers to answer your question, but it's very significant improvement. Yes, sir.
2 questions that relate to each other. What would you say is the biggest thing holding Zambia back from what it could be, I guess, maybe in the next, 5 to 10 years, or just in general? And then same thing for the U.S. What do you think is the biggest thing holding?
I'll answer Zambia, then I'll pass on the U.S. Zambia, I think Zambia needs, the primary thing we need is we don't have a strong constitution. I live in a nation where a new president could come in today, change the name of an airport, appoint ambassadors at will, and there's not any procedures. I think when we do get a strong constitution that is respected, I think we're good to go, because then that will give leaders a way to govern and to operate. Our constitution is very weak. That answered the first part. Then for the United States, I don't think I'm an expert, so I can't dwell on that. But I think in the United States, maybe one of the problems that we have that would help us a little bit better is that if we're not agreeing, we are arguing. I think if we could learn a little bit of listening to each other, maybe we'll do a little bit better.
Henry, how long would you say it would take let's say typical American, but for an American to really understand Zambia, how long would they have to live there and interact with people?
If I'd known you were going to ask me that question, I'd have brought my fancy thing and I've called the guy at the embassy. I have somebody who works at the embassy who's really effective at the U.S. Embassy in Zambia that we met. How long? Wow. I won't put a time on it. I'll put a an individual person type, you know? Some of us are quick to pick and pull things from people, where others of us take a little bit longer. But if you're a quick learner, Zambian folks are pretty open. They'll give you things and information without much prodding. And so it wouldn't take you long. If you're really out in the community, 6 months, you could get some good information to be functional, I believe, you know? We're not a closed society. One of the advantages that we have in Zambia, and I don't say this just because I'm from there, the pin that I'm wearing on my suit says "One Zambia, One Nation." Remember the man who ruled us for 27 years? He came up with that slogan. And we have over 50 tribes in my country. He broke down tribal sentiments. You know? To the point that in Zambia, we're not like, you know, like in Nigeria or Zimbabwe, where you still have Igbo, Yoruba, Ndebele, and Shona, those kind of issues. We don't have tribal issues. So I think that creates a different environment for the people. Yes, sir. So 6 months. I'd give you 6 months. I'd give you 3 since it's you, sir.
Yeah. That's great. That's relatively short when you think about it.
Yes, and I just said to be functional, not to be giving us policy matter solutions.
So I have a question sort of related to what you just said, but you know, today is actually the anniversary of the start of the Rwandan genocide.
That's right.
And you know, I was thinking a lot about tribal affiliation and your loyalty to your tribe when you were talking about how the president comes and gets down to meet the tribal leader or tribal chief. So how do, and a lot of that's the result of colonization, right, and the formation of the different countries, but how do effective leaders deal with this idea? I know to some point, to some extent, Tanzania, you know, is pretty effective with creating a country first and then your tribe, but that's not the case in a lot of places. So how do you get your people to come together and not fight with one another?
It is difficult. I want you to pay attention to, there's a tribe, if you're interested in Zambia, Lozi tribe. They're the ones who signed their first agreement to give over the land rights to the British South Africa company, which was owned by Cecil Rhodes. So, you know, Africa's still educating a lot of foreigners. You know, the Rhodes Scholarship. A couple of American presidents have been educated by African money. Is that ironic? Yeah, I've seen a statue in Cape Town. It's huge. There's a protest right now at University of Cape Town to tear it down. It's very difficult. The Lozi tribe are trying to break away even in my country right now as we speak. There's talks of secession, just like Texans, and it's difficult. So what happens when you become president of my country? The biggest issue you have with appointing your cabinet is tribal mixing. So even though you have well-trained, well-qualified people, I think sometimes you have to play to make sure that, like right now, for the first time in my country, we have a vice president that is a Lozi, and it's a woman. So this president is playing to that issue right now, you know? He's trying to pull them in. So the next president might be like, then pull somebody in. It's difficult. People are extremely tribal. I say we don't have issues, not as much as other countries, but we still do have some, you know. But in terms of social marriage and all that, people married across tribes. But when resources come up, I think even issues of racism usually rise up higher when resources are in play. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, so when resources play out, oh my goodness. If you look at my country, the western province of my country is very underdeveloped. That's where the Lozis are from. And guess where the Bemba people are from? The north. That's my people. We're the ones who ruled the country for a long time. So we got a little bit better stuff. Doesn't make sense. I'm ashamed to say that, but it's kind of the truth there.
I think we have time for one more question, and I'll have to break it up.
Yes, this kind of plays on the theme of paradigms we were talking about earlier. If I remember correctly, there was something you said probably about 7 years ago that was along the lines of when the African continent is done exporting its natural resources, it will begin to export love. How can we get that export soon?
You're getting it right now. In fact, our first president said those words. He said, you know, the final export out of Africa would be to remind the rest of the world how to be human. You know, he said when the rest of the world has forgotten how to be human. We'll remind them that this is how you actually love. And I'll give you a quick story to tell you that story. For me, when somebody dies, like say for example, I have a friend who dies or a parent dies, I don't send flowers. I show up. I don't think that I'm superior, but I think it's very human to mourn with those that mourn. Or if you were sick, I'd show up at the hospital if you're truly a friend of mine. And I think those are the things that even when my parents visit here, you know, the last time my dad was here, he said, Henry, how do y'all stay sane in this society when you're so unconnected? I said, Dad, we just make it. So I think that'll be the export. So for me, I brought that little part of Africa. Most of my friends that I have, even in College Station, the ones that are really my good friends, I don't call when I show up. I just show up. Okay, so yes, I think humanity, that Ubuntu, will be hopefully our final export, if there's such a thing.